That's John Fallon and Kevin Kilbane again.
But I don't think anyone within the squad was aware of, that time that Mick and Roy had these meetings, that, Roy was walking, Roy was back, and all these sort of things. I don't think anyone was really aware of everything fully what had happened around then. And then obviously when the meeting started, Mick brought in this interview that Roy had done with Tom Humphries on a bit of paper and just said, look, I want to address this. And Mick didn't really get too much out. Mick didn't really say an awful lot. He just said, look, I want to address this. I think you owe the players an apology. And boom, that was it. It just kind of went, and Roy went.
He didn't get past that sentence. Let's put it that way. And then Roy just said, I don't know how it started, but it wasn't. He was calm, grand, which is probably more frightening.
When the exchange started, then Roy was obviously on my left shoulder, and my thought when it was going off, obviously when it really started to flare up, was, look, they are absolutely going to come to blows here. There's going to be punches thrown, and I am certain to get a dig within this. So I was kind of preparing myself for these two just to come together, and I was going to get a smack.
Yeah, it was rabbits in the headlight. Genuinely, honestly, there was say 5 tables with 10 people at each table. Mick was at the top end. There was a door behind Mick which was locked. There was glass doors out to the garden of Gethsemane, as we called it, right? So I was excited to sit at the door and it's to stop people coming in and coming out in case the band came back and started. And I think Stephen Finnan and someone else was sitting close to Roy, right beside him. My big problem with it looking back was I've seen a lot worse, like physically, not punches, but coming close to it. And I'm looking and saying, someone's going to say something. Can I say, Roy, shut the up, right? Or someone just diffuse it or infuse it or whatever it was. But it just went on, and I think everybody just went, whoa. I'd love to have thought, you wouldn't look at your watch and say alarm, but it could have been 5 minutes, could have been 8 minutes, which is a long time when you think, if you look at your watch for 8 minutes. And it was a bit back and forth then. He kind of said his piece back, and it was lost then.
As for what was actually said, that's been the subject of debate for 20 years. According to Roy's account, the real point of contention was when Mick accused him of feigning injury to avoid the second leg of the World Cup playoff against Iran.
The final straw was when I was accused of being disloyal, faking injury, and going against my teammates in front of everybody. And I wouldn't accept it, and I still don't accept that.
But Kevin Kilbane doesn't remember it the same way.
The constant message that I hear that's coming from that Roy saying Roy was accused of feigning injury, that's the thing that keeps on coming back. Well, I was accused of feigning injury. What else would I say? Never once, and I've never once spoken to any other player, any of the other 22 members of the squad or however it was, and 15 members of staff. Have anyone ever mentioned that was said to Roy? It was never mentioned. Roy, I think Roy could have taken the fact is that Mick actually said to him through that meeting, look, I think you owe it to these guys because they went to Iran for that second leg. I think that, and Roy's immediate response to that, I remember through that bit was, look, you had an agreement with Alex Ferguson, you had an agreement with him that I wasn't going to go. So whether or not that was construed by Roy as saying, I didn't think it was that way. Look, you feigned injury to get out and go into Iran.
I could see where he's coming from with that, but it wasn't black and white. It wasn't even grey. In my book, there may have been the implication, not about the injury, about obviously referring to the second Iran game, right? So when we got up in the morning, we didn't realise that we, staff or players, that Roy had gone. And my recollection of it, without trying to involve anyone else, was that Roy had told Mick Bourne that he was heading back because he had a knee injury. And Mick Bourne told Mick McCarthy. And Mick, if you take it to its other side of it, would have felt, well, why didn't you tell me? I assume, and I'm assuming things, which maybe I shouldn't, and Mick was a bit taken aback. So we go to Iran. We did qualify, even though I beat in the last minute. And think Mick referred to that, but didn't refer to the injury. I think it was more the procedure. It was more the, well, why didn't you tell me personally? And then Mick was kind of not turning that. Then Roy was taking it personal and saying, well, you're implying that I wasn't injured. I didn't see that. I didn't take that. But I see where if you wanted to see that, you could see it.
I never felt like that would be the issue at all. Roy always missed games for Ireland. You know, if we had a game and a friendly, or sometimes if we had double headers and things like this, there was always, I'm sure, a battle with Alex Ferguson and Mick McCarthy that Roy would miss one of the games. You can have him for one game. And that's how it turned out for that Iran game. He had him for one game, and he had to go back to play for Man United at the weekend, so he missed our second leg. So that's the overriding thing that comes from that. It's always like, well, you know, whether or not you're on Mick's side or Roy's side, it's like, well, Mick said he feigned injury to miss the game, and that was never said. I never heard that said once in that meeting. You know, there's also things that said maybe equally on the other side where Roy accused Mick of being an English cunt. And he never said that. Roy never said that to him at all. He did say you shouldn't be managing my country. Now, whether or not people within that room misunderstood that's what Roy was saying to Mick, that he called him an English whatever, he never said that. Roy never said that to Mick at all. There was obviously a lot said, and, you know, see you next Tuesday, the word was used quite a lot in describing Mick, but he never called him an English whatever. So these are the two things that constantly come out from that, and they both weren't said in my opinion. You know, I think the parting line from Mick was, "Where do we go from here now, Roy? Because it's either you go or I go, and I'm going nowhere." I think that was the last line of it, and Roy just stood up, and that was it. He just walked out.
I think there was stick the World Cup up your arse was the last thing, from what I can remember. I'm sorry about the French.
At home, the story would dominate the headlines and the news bulletins.
Ireland skipper Roy Keane has been sent home from the World Cup. This has been confirmed by manager Mick McCarthy at a news conference.
Claims degenerated into a slang match between himself and Keane. He said he would not tolerate the level of abuse he received, and so the Republic of Ireland captain was sent packing.
As Keane went to pack his bags, McCarthy was left to deliver the news to the Irish media.
I can't, will not tolerate not being spoken to that, the level of abuse that was thrown at me, so I have sent him home.
The quickly arranged press conference to announce his exit would become a major point of contention for Keane.
You laugh at shock. Sometimes people react differently. Like, you sat there and said, did that just happen? Like, and then it dawns on you that it's not going to come with us. Like, and they called a press conference quickly, which I do understand. There was a bit of a mixed, but what else could you do? Because the worst thing could have happened was say nothing, go out, get a tip and say, Mick Roy's going home, or where it came from. And so they called a press conference quickly, which looked like to the untrained eye, can I put it that way? That I was too quick to be done and that, but you could see how was it going to get out, who was going to put it out there. So you had to kind of make clear of what happened and what the consequences of what happened was, and that Roy decided I was going home either way.
Back to Dara Whelan.
The country just became engulfed in this kind of, suddenly it was like you were either pro Roy Keane, he had gotten sent home by this stupid manager, or, you know, he had walked out on his country just before the World Cup because of his stubborn, mentality. So it was literally black or white. There was no grey area here. Like,
Roy Keane is a consummate professional, and he wouldn't undermine his manager or cause any disruption unless there was a good reason.
It's a disaster. I mean, it's not only does it totally diminish our chances of getting through the group. We're going over there, and you're not going to see our very best player. You're not going to see the team's talisman, the captain.
Mick McCarthy was pushed into a corner where he had to look at the big picture. Would the performance of the team be affected when we went out of Cameroon?
Where is Roy Keane now? Is he still out of Saipan with the squad?
Physically, I don't know where he is, but I presume he's still in Saipan, and arrangements will be made to take him home.
The week on the holiday island had been a disaster. While the Ireland squad flew off to Japan, Roy was left behind to make his own way back to Manchester. David Marr stayed behind to capture one of the most iconic images of the whole episode.
Yeah, I would have been planning on moving over to Japan with the team to continue on preparations for the first game against the Cameroons. But so I'm not too sure whether the office made a decision, I made a decision, maybe we all made a decision that like there's no way you can leave this story. So there wasn't many of us. I think there was only about 3 photographers and there was 1 camera crew. So, the photographs that I captured at the airport were probably as big as any of the pictures that I ever took in my whole career, to be honest with you, and particularly the photograph with Roy with the exit sign. If it's a pictures that you're going to take that's under control, and you'd look for the light and you'd look for the background and stuff like that. But when Roy Keane is about to leave the island, head back to the UK, and there's an exit sign on the wall, you've probably just hit the jackpot, to be honest with you.
As Keane and McCarthy turned their backs on each other, the reaction at home was one of shock and deep division between those who believed in Roy and those who felt the manager was right.